Episode of Marriage on a Tightrope. I'm Alan.
And I'm Katie, and we're still married.
We just started our fourth now session with our workshop on a tightrope. So we're getting to know a little over 20 couples, which is awesome and very, very fun. We've had a number of questions about, is there going to be more of these sessions throughout the year? And there will be dates forthcoming, but we'll do at least one more. But Katie, we do have a kind of a special for Valentine's Day, single workshop that may be A, more affordable than a full course, but B, it's kind of a fun topic. Why don't you tell everybody about it?
So we, again, have partnered with Natasha Helfer to bring to you sex and intimacy.
We're bringing you sex.
We're bringing you sex because, Valentine's is coming up, and that's basically what people want, right? Isn't that why, the husband plans the nice dinner and gets the chocolates and the teddy bear that women hate?
It's not always the man that is trying to get the sex.
Oh, that's true. That's very stereotypical.
And that's one of the things that we talk about in the presentation is libido differences and how it's not only male versus female.
That's right. So just to make it affordable for everyone, and because it's funny, we are making this class $69.
Oh, that's fun. I kind of joked hey, we should make it $69. And then I went back and put my head down and started working, and later on, I see text messages back and forth from Katie and Natasha, and let's do $69.
Let's do $69. So you can go to marriageonatightrope.thinkific.com, and that is going to be online content that you'll watch before our live Q&A. So you'll watch almost a full 2-hour presentation. And then, you bring your questions. We have 90 minutes with Natasha, who is a certified sex therapist and knows her stuff. And so we will meet on Thursday, February 11th at 7 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. We did it a little bit earlier so that our East Coast friends had kind of an okay time period, right?
Well,
from 9
so that
o'clock.
After the 90 minutes, they still have some awake time to go and practice what they learned.
That's why we're doing it on February 11th, is so that they can go practice what they learned for Valentine's weekend.
That's right. Now, this is not a Kama Sutra course.
No, it's not.
To be fair.
In fact, let me just say a couple of things about what is in the course, what you can expect to hear in the presentation. So you'll hear things about positive and negative messaging surrounding sexuality, what realistic expectations of sex are, differences in sexual values. Alan mentioned libido, typical sexual tenders, and then finally,
what's an example of a sexual tender?
Maybe if you're wanting to do something that I'm not willing to do with sex toys or with.
I no longer feel like masturbation's wrong, for example.
Yes.
That would be one example of a tender.
A tender.
One spouse is like, nah, not cool with that. And the other spouse is like, well, we need to talk about this.
Right, exactly. So how do you talk about and negotiate that? And then we talk about 6 principles of sexual health, and then the benefits of healthy sexual activity. And this should be, and it's always I don't want to say a crowd pleaser.
Oh, it is.
It is. It is.
It's always extremely pleasurable. So this sex and intimacy class is done as part of our 6-week workshop as a bonus week. So we offer it for free for couples that join before a certain date, and then the rest of the couples can join it if they would like to. So this is unique where we're doing this just as a standalone, which is kind of fun for that $69. You can go to, like Katie mentioned, marriageonatightrope.thinkific.com. Right now, the presentation is available. That 2-hour presentation with Natasha, Katie, and myself is available now. So you watch that ahead of time, and then when we get together live, you can ask questions. And we also assign 4 different kind of activities. We call them your tightrope in action, to put into exercise some of the things that we've learned throughout the time together in that presentation, that 2-hour presentation.
Yeah, and that's a really good way to connect and to work on your sexuality together. So
that's right. Awesome. We hope to see you then.
Join us, yes.
Now, we have an episode, not just an advertisement. We have an episode today of an interview with the Rosenhans, Alex and Megan Rosenhan. I've been talking with Alex for a little bit now, and didn't know his full story until this episode. Now, we want to preface this with a trigger warning about suicidal thoughts, even suicide attempts are discussed. They are mentioned and then talked about for a few minutes after that. So when you hear a suicide attempt mentioned, if that is triggering for you, skip ahead 3 or 4 minutes and you'll be done. It's not an ongoing topic in the episode, but it is mentioned. And
also, trigger warning, another topic that is actually discussed and is a big part of their story is mental health illness and awareness. So just note that. And we thought that this was a really important subject, something that I think doesn't get a lot of focus is mental health, especially in transitioning LDS members. So
a lot of times the transitioner feels like we need to put up this front of, I'm doing so much better now that I've left the church. I'm so much happier. Everything's going so well. If you know what movie that's from, email us and I'll give you a high five. Oh no, we'll give you a discount code for the Sex and Intimacy course, so it's only $68. But anyway, it's Moulin Rouge. So what were we talking about?
You just ruined it for everyone.
I don't care. I ruin things, and that's fine. No, it's often taboo to even admit it, and add into the fact that males are in our culture pretty well known to just swallowing their feelings and not talking about it. It's not manly to talk about your feelings.
Nor is it to seek out help, especially for mental health.
Exactly.
Yes.
So for that reason, we're so glad that Alex and Megan leaned into those biases and leaned into that difficulty to actually talk about it. And you'll hear it. It's not easy to talk about. And
one of the things I love about this episode is so many of our interviews are from people who have gone through their transition and have like words of wisdom to share. Megan and Alex are in the middle of it, and things are raw and things are hard, but there's a lot of truth and a lot of vulnerability in what they share. So we hope you enjoy this episode.
I do have to admit, Katie, it's been a while since you and I have just done an episode of just what's going on with us. We have, I think, a big reason why is not because we don't have things to share, but because we set up that calendar for couples to be able to just go and sign up. And it's actually really worked. Like, it's gotten us a really good stream of couples, if you've listened to the last handful of episodes, telling their own story, which we are so happy has worked out. But in the next couple of episodes, we're closing in on 100. So episode 100 for sure will at least be more in detail and probably a retrospective of what the last 100 episodes has looked like.
Oh, you're setting us up for failure.
It'll be a full-scale musical. We'll have a prelude and a One Day More style song where it brings all the styles together. Trust me, episode 100 is going to be something to write home about.
Okay, can't wait to see what you put together.
Enjoy this episode with the Rosenhans. We'd now like to welcome to Marriage on a Tightrope, Megan and Alex Rosenhan. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. Excited.
We're excited to get to know you guys a little bit better. For those who have never been on Marriage on the Tightrope, we tend to we want to get to know you guys a little before we hit record, right? Megan and Alex, we talked. I called you my own name. Megan and Alex, we chatted for a few minutes beforehand, but we like to really get to know you on the episode. So there's this weird balance of wanting to make sure that you're comfortable. We break the ice, but not too much, because it's fun to get natural reactions and whatnot. So hopefully we've met that goal, that objective. But we would love to hear your story. The interviews that we do typically, right, they last about an hour. And if you're listening to this, we learn a little bit about the couple before they met, how they were upbrought. Is that past tense of upbringing? Sure, thanks. How they were upbrought in the church, and we get pretty quickly into the faith crisis.
The nitty gritty. Isn't that what
Nacho Libre?
Yeah, Jack Black says. Yes.
That's right. By the way, if you don't follow Jack Black on TikTok, he is just the breath of shirtless air. I'll say that. He's always shirtless. It's wonderful.
He's hairy.
He is. And he just owns it. He owns it. So anyways, this is not a Jack Black interview. This is a Rosenhan interview. So I'll shut up. Let's throw it over to the Rosenhans and talk a little bit about your upbringing. Megan, would you mind if we start with you?
Sure. So I grew up in Sandy, Orthodox family. All my brothers served missions. My experience in the church, I don't know. I don't have any bad experiences that I can think of. When I was young, I had some health problems that doctors said that I would struggle to walk and I would struggle in science and all these things, and none of them ended up coming true. And we've always attributed that to priesthood blessings and fasting and prayer. So that's kind of been a big base of my testimony, even though I wasn't old enough to remember that, just the stories being told. I've always been a believer in the church.
Well, Megan, I'll add one thing. I think that it's important to point out that even a heartless, faithless peon like myself can say, I'm really glad that none of that ended up happening.
Well, thank you.
Me too.
So that's really great. That's really great. So you mentioned that you have a few brothers.
Yes, I have 4 brothers.
And no sisters.
No sisters.
You're the solo girl. How was that growing up?
It was good. I learned to hold my own against him.
Yes. So now do you hold your own against Alex?
Yes. Very much.
Maybe it should be stated that Alex attempts to hold his own against Megan.
Yes.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Megan, so I'm curious. You said that your family's super Orthodox. So, well, you said that they were Orthodox.
Could we do like the litmus test?
Yeah, let's do the litmus test. Like,
did you have Coke in the house?
Yes. We have Coke.
Okay.
Okay, so
strike one.
So caffeine was okay.
Yes, caffeine was okay. Like, my dad rarely drank water. It was always Coke. Like,
that's fair.
He switched to Diet Coke now.
I've seen him drink water once.
Multiple runs to Sonic for his 44-ounce Diet Cokes. Like, anytime he says going to the post office, he's really going to Sonic to get Diet Coke.
Let's see, what's another one? Oh, did you go to church when you were on vacation?
No, we didn't.
Okay.
We usually went out to eat on Sundays, like on Mother's Day. Our family home evenings, if we had them, was more like going to get ice cream.
Right.
Sounds like an awesome family.
Jeez, I want to be raised in that Orthodox family.
The most memorable family home evening, I think, for me and all my siblings, we were teenagers, and my mom, we were talking about Caiaphas' palace, and my mom kept saying, "Don't go where you won't be tempted." And like, she just kept repeating it over and over, and finally my dad cut in and was like, "Okay, that's enough." So anytime something happens, we're always like, "Yeah, Mom, don't go where you won't be tempted."
She'll never live that one down.
Never live that one down.
That's right. Did you ever feel any pressure? I think sometimes, like, if you're the only girl, you may have like pressure from a parent to act a certain way or be a certain way. Did you feel that with growing up with boys, or not really?
Not really. I mean, my mom, like, I wore 2 pieces. I wore tank tops. I got some grief from some friends about the fact that I wore tank tops, but never from like my family.
Your parents seem a little more relaxed Orthodox than my parents' Orthodox was.
My dad had a little bit of a wild child phase in his teens. Stopped going to church. His dad was in the bishopric, and he kind of rebelled a little bit, drank, didn't go on a mission. I feel like they were pretty chill Orthodox parents.
Alex, let's turn it over to you. Tell us about your childhood.
Yeah, so I also grew up in Sandy, Utah, about a mile and a half away from Megan. My family, so I have an older sister, younger brother, big into sports, on the litmus test, on the orthodoxy. At times, in different parts of our growing up, when we did go on vacation, every once in a while we would go to church, depending on where my parents kind of were at. So every once in a while we'd go to church, and I always hated that when on vacation. But grew up playing sports. That was my passion. That was our family's passion. So a lot of our home evenings and family nights were really, instead of doing the traditional lesson and, all of that, which we did every once in a while, was more spent as a family, usually on the baseball field. So I played mainly baseball. And so usually consisted of me, my dad pitching to me and my mom, my brother, my sister kind of run around chasing the baseballs. My sister played softball too. And so that was our family time, which looking back at it, I think it was a lot more effective for us than, the sit down, let's have a formal meeting. That didn't work for our family. Didn't have the attention span for it. Looking from the outside, growing up, it looked very, for me, Orthodox, followed all the steps, got baptized at 8, got the priesthood at 12, was always passing the sacrament and, just went up the ladder and tried to do what was expected. Then we got to the mission, went on a mission. For me, it was following, making sure I was doing everything that I was supposed to be doing, reading my scriptures, praying, everything that was taught at church, those basics. And so at times we would have family prayers, but it wasn't, every night or every morning. It'd be kind of, for a few weeks or when we could do it, and then it would kind of fade away and come back. And so I wouldn't say super Orthodox, but my parents definitely didn't let me ditch Sunday. So we were at church every Sunday on time. And so, they didn't let us off the hook on that. I went to, all the activities. Once I got to scouting age is when sports took over. So I got to life. My mom pushed me to get to my life and said it was up to me to get my Eagle Scout. And so I never did because baseball got in the way eventually. But did all the normal, what you call normal things.
Sure. And so your youth experience prior to the mission was probably a bit typical as far as, there's no unearthed trauma from your childhood as far as the church goes. It was just a normal churchy childhood.
Yeah. And I call it the, 30,000 foot view. If you looked at it, no. Looking back at it now, and this is where, whenever you want to get into some of the mental health things, there was definitely trauma in my childhood growing up, especially around doing the right things, around church, and feeling like, I had a hard time with feeling like, did God love me? Did he care about me? And so that was always a struggle. And so I made it a point to try to do the right things and not go party, not go drink, and not, go do the things that I wasn't supposed to be doing, and try to be kind of on that straight and narrow path.
Right.
So,
I'm going to go to Megan because I want to get into the mental health stuff. But first, I want to, you said that, Alex, that you guys lived 1.5 miles apart. In Utah land, that's like 2 or 3 states. It could be pretty far, right? So Megan, do you want to tell us how you met and how you ended up together?
We went to middle school together. I didn't know him then. He says he remembers me from 7th grade choir class.
She had Doc Martens, the brown ones.
Oh man, that is a sign of wealth right there.
I was envious of them, and she was tall and athletic. So I was like, "Who is that?"
Our sophomore year of high school, he was dating one of my teammates, and that's, I think, how we first met. And then our senior year, we had mutual friends, and that's kind of where we became friends. So we started hanging out with this mutual group of friends. And then after high school, everybody moved away, went off to school. I stayed here and went to Slick. He went down to Price and would come up on the weekends and we'd hang out. We just kind of built like that really good friendship. You know, we talked about a lot of things, had fun together. And I think about the time he got his mission call, I think we were in that phase where we were like really good friends and we both liked each other, but we didn't want to jeopardize the friendship. And right about the time he got his mission call, things changed and we kind of started dating. And then he left on his mission. I told him up front I wasn't going to wait for him. So I wrote him weekly for like
8 months.
8 months. And then I started dating other people and had some guys that were not so great. And so the writing dropped off in the middle of the mission and then picked back up at the end. And when he was coming home, I was scared of what would happen because I was kind of in a phase where I was hating guys at the time. And I was afraid of what would happen. I wasn't ready to get married. And so when he got home, of course, I was excited to see him. I think his mom made me wait like a week or something before I was allowed. I think you guys went on vacation or something right when you got home.
Yeah.
So I had to wait like a week to even see him. But then we would like make plans and I would like bail on him last minute. I was a total jerk to him when he got home. So he was dating this other girl. We would text like every once in a while. And at one point he texted me like, hey, is there any chance with us? Like she's talking about getting married. And I just want to make sure like that things are done with us, that there's no shot. And I was like, whatever, if you want to marry her, that's like, I can't say, you know, and then we didn't talk for a long time. And my family used to go camping up at Moon Lake every year over Labor Day. And this one year, for whatever reason, he was on my mind like all weekend. There's no cell service up there, but I couldn't get him off my mind. And so as soon as we got back into service, I sent him a text, which he almost didn't respond to because he thought I was going to tell him I was getting married, which was so far from what was happening. So yeah, he responded back and he had just gone down to Dixie to play baseball, but he came up that next weekend and we hung out and yeah, it was like we never missed a beat. And
I think we're
happily ever after.
Yeah, I think we're engaged but
in December,
3 or 4 months later,
and then got married in June.
So what year did you get married?
2008.
2008. Okay, so you've got 12 years under your belt.
Yes.
Congratulations. Okay, so you get married, and what were your plans in the beginning? Maybe Alex, you can talk about that.
So we got married. I had a year left down at Dixie, and so we moved down there and spent the year. I played baseball. She went to school and worked some to help pay for the bills.
Some.
So a lot, I guess. And a lot of student aid.
Well, I mean, I was a CNA. It's not like I was making boatloads of money.
Yeah.
Right.
That's true. You know, after that year, we actually moved back up to Salt Lake and figured it was okay. Get my degree finished. I had a semester left because I had switched majors in between. So I transferred to the University of Utah. The plan was, the normal, get a job, eventually start a family, raise them in the church.
And let's just, we're going to fast forward and we want you to take us to when you start to feel a faith transition happening. If it was for Megan or Alex, we know the answer, but why don't you reveal to the listeners the answer to that?
So it was me. I know. And it, so when we were back in Philadelphia, I would say was probably the time period where I felt the most connected, involved in the church because the ward we were in was kind of half in the city, half in the suburbs. It was one of those wards where we had 600, 700 people on the rolls, 100 people showed up. A lot of them were very new to the church and didn't know a lot of the doctrine. And I was called fairly quickly as the ward clerk. So I spent the whole time, we were back there, how long, 3 years?
Well, I was there for 2.
So
you were there longer.
Almost 3 years. And I was the ward clerk the whole time. So I was going to all of the bishopric meetings. Because I worked in finance, I spent a lot of time meeting with people that the bishop would ask me to, help them create budgets and manage their finances. I taught elders quorum once a week. I went out with the missionaries consistently. And so, for me, coming from Utah, it was that mission field, right? It's outside of Utah, smaller ward. So I was very involved, knew everyone, and felt great. And it was actually right before we moved back to Utah that kind of sparked, I would say, the faith transition. And this was late 2013. So the essays some of them had started just coming out. During the 3 years I was back there, all of my employees would ask questions about the church. And I loved it because missionary opportunity. And so I got all kinds of questions and it was exciting and fun for me. And the essays had just been released. But at the same time, one of my employees had come up to me and said, "Hey, here's a couple questions I have for you." And I had no idea what he was talking about. And asked him where he got it from. And he said, I did some research on the internet. It was around, some of the Rock in the Hat and the multiple first visions. And I was like, I've never heard this. I thought I was pretty knowledgeable. So then the essays dropped that said exactly what he was talking about. And I just told him, that's just anti-Mormon lies that are on there. Don't read that. And so it kind of sparked a curiosity of, okay, what am I missing in the church? What haven't I been taught, or what do I not know? And so we moved back right after that, and I started to kind of explore down that path a little bit. I had even printed out the whole, I think at that point it was like 85 or 90 pages of the CS letter, but never really read the whole thing. And that's when kind of the peak of my mental health issues kind of got to that peak right at about that same time, and the breaking point. And so it kind of stopped my investigation into, a lot of those doctrinal or historical issues, and life turned into focusing on mental health issues and how we were going to get through that. And so, the faith transition part was put on the back burner for a while.
So, Alex, are those two things, looking back, do they seem connected? Like, does the stress of learning these things and kind of your mind is kind of racing, do you think like there's a correlation there? I'm not trying to lead you to say yes. I'm just curious what your experience was.
Yeah, for me, I was getting progressively worse and depressed to a point finally where Megan was the first person in my life to actually get me to talk about what was going on and get me to see someone. And so I was diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder, which is basically a combination of schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. It's like 0.2% of the population have it diagnosed. But I see a correlation as far as once I was able to, get on the right medications and talk with my therapist about, the disorder and what was going on in my life, it kind of turned the light bulb on in my head where I think more critically about things. And so I think that helped, when I started really diving into some of the historical and doctrinal things, and definitely I think helped me to take that step that sometimes is, very scary, of going down the rabbit hole.
Megan, what did you notice was happening first? Did you notice that his mental health was deteriorating, or was it a combination of him doing all of this studying? And did you know about what he was studying?
I had no idea what he was studying. So for me, all I knew about at the time was his mental health. And when he told me, basically what he told me was that he had been suicidal for the last year. And that scared me. So I wanted his parents, we were out on a date when it happened, and his parents had our kids, and I wanted to go straight to it. Like when we picked the kids up, tell his parents, so we would have that additional support. But he didn't want to, and it wasn't my secret to share. We got him help, got him into a therapist through my work's EAP, until we could find something else. It wasn't until a couple years later that I knew anything about his digging into the church or studying the church.
That's really hard to share, Megan. Thank you for sharing that. That's, I think too, maybe your approaches are different, right? Megan, you wanted to go find help right away. And you said you're a nurse, right?
I am a nurse, yeah.
Yeah. So you're a fixer. You want to fix it. You want to get it together. And then Alex, you're like, hold off. I am not ready yet. Is that how you felt? And when were you able to come out and tell people, or tell your parents, people that were close to you, that you needed help?
Yeah. So it wasn't for probably 6 months, until 6 months or so, until we sat our parents down, and I told them what was going on. And then probably another 6 months after that, until we told, our brothers and sisters, what was going on. And for me, I can remember back to when I was 5. Starting at 5 is when I started to really have a hard time. That's why I talked about the 30,000 foot view of my childhood. It was great, but at the same time, I was living this unknown, for me, tortured life, because, in the 90s, 80s, 90s, I was being taught in church that, that Satan goes after the strongest people to try to tear him down. And, it was being taught about, his legions of army, that would, try to lead you astray. And at that same time, I'm all of a sudden started at 5 hearing voices, hallucinating, where, I'm seeing people and I'm scared. I remember night after night, for hours after I go to bed, sitting in my bed with my blanket over my head and a flashlight, reading the scriptures, praying for hours, trying to, in my eyes, get Satan away, because that's how I felt what was going on. As part of that, it made me try to keep on that straight and narrow path, because I was afraid if I told anyone what was going on, that I'd be sent to a mental institution and I wouldn't be able to play baseball. And that was the one thing that that the voices went away, that I felt normal, was during practice, during games. Other than that, it was, voices 24/7, hallucinations. And as a kid, I was very, very active. That my parents would go to parent-teacher conference, and I was the kid that, hey, Alex is very athletic, very good at sports, can't shut up in the classroom, disrupts everyone, to all of a sudden I hit junior high and I went dead silent, to where they said, oh, he's a great student, doesn't interrupt. And my parents thought, are you talking about my child? But it was, this accumulation of this schizoaffective disorder that was building. And so for 30 years of my life, or I guess 25 years of my life, I kept that secret as close as I could to, because I was so afraid that if someone found out about it, what would happen and would be taken away. And so even when we got married, and Megan would tell you, the first year of our marriage was very difficult, especially on her, because I felt her getting too close to that secret. And so I started to push back, because I was afraid if she found out who I actually was, what was actually going on, she wouldn't want to be with me, or, I'd get sent off somewhere. And so, I kept that secret until she finally got me to break.
Until 8 years later.
Yeah. So it was, there was a couple suicide attempts in there, which luckily didn't happen for some reason. I have a high tolerance for medication, which helped. But there was a lot of dark times leading up to that. And it got to a point where I either had to do something about it, or, a suicide attempt was going to be successful, because it was just like I couldn't keep living like that.
Wow. Thank you for sharing. It's tough, heavy stuff. Maybe like many listeners now who just don't quite, some of us can relate to some anxiety and some depression, especially heightened in moments of the transition away from the church, or being the spouse of a transitioner, can bring some anxiety and depression. But I wouldn't be surprised if not one of our listeners can relate to your specific disorder of schizoaffective disorder. You mentioned even as a young child, you really felt like this was something coming from an evil source, coming from Satan, and you were trying to pray it away. You were trying to read the scriptures and make it go away. Can we ask? I think of the movie A Beautiful Mind, right? Or did you have Paul Bettany and Ed Harris talking to you, or like were these the voices and the hallucinations? Were they specific to spiritual matters, or they make you feel bad about yourself? I'm curious, kind of how that works.
Yeah. So for me, I have two voices in my head. One's a female voice, one's a male voice. It's only been recently since I've started to talk about a lot of this stuff. And
if you don't want to talk about it in detail, that's completely fine.
This is definitely, I'm more open to it now, because it's kind of freeing to talk about it, because I think people can relate on some level. I like to think of it as, think about the worst possible things that, if you go back to, say, your high school days, or that a girl you liked or a boy you liked could say about you, or getting bullied, the worst possible things that a girl could say about me, and then the worst possible things that guy could say about me. And that's going on in my head nonstop. They're always talking about, how bad I am at everything, how useless I am, bad father, bad husband, bad at my job, everything. Always attack. And if it's not doing that, then they're basically narrating my life. So it's like, you like baseball, I like baseball. It's like listening to a
play-by-play.
And so,
if one of the voices was Vin Scully, I mean, I could see
that would be a voice for sure.
It would have been at least a little peaceful, right?
Yeah. So, growing up, it was very scary because I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know, if I was imagining things, if the hallucinations, it was, to me, I thought I was seeing, spirits, or, I would look and see someone standing in my doorway, but they're not standing, they're floating there. Or I wouldn't call it like demon type things flying at me at night when I'm in bed as a young kid that would scare me. And I didn't know really what was going on, and then as I've gotten older, the hallucinations have gotten less and less with medication, but I'll still see people that I don't necessarily always recognize, but that are there that follow me, kind of like a beautiful mind, but not to that extent. But the
not as well screenplayed, right?
Yeah, but the voices are there constant, and so when I'm on that high of the bipolar part, they're less attacking, and when I'm in that depressive state, which is usually a more depressive than manic, is when they definitely attack and it's nonstop. And so, just think about someone, talking in your ear 24/7. It's hard to concentrate a lot of times. It's hard to communicate. It's hard to sleep. It's hard to do a lot of things. And so it was a huge struggle and became so bad that, something had to be done about it.
2014, very similar to you, kind of stumbled on some Gospel Topics essays and a few new topics. Didn't feel like I could go down that way because it kind of scared me a little bit. Had some mental health issues as well that had to take care of. It was only when those started to feel like they were under control that I felt like I could readdress how I felt about the church. Is that how the timeline worked for you?
Absolutely. And that's why I think it's connected, because I spent 2 or 3 years really. I mean, it was trying to keep this secret was so bad that even when I went and started going to a therapist, they first diagnosed me as bipolar because I didn't tell them about the voices or hallucinations or anything. I didn't tell Megan about that part for 6 months at least. And so it was that bad where I didn't want anyone to know.
Mm-hmm.
And so finally, when, going through all the medication and the changes and the disaster that anyone that's gone through that I was taking some pills. I mean, so many pills that couldn't figure out which one was which, but one that would make me so tired that I would like lay on my desk at work and sleep for 20 minutes because I couldn't function. Katie, I know you like Disneyland. And we actually went to Disneyland. This is how we figured it out, but we went to Disneyland, and one day I forgot to take a certain pill and things were good. The next day I took the pill and I literally couldn't function. I just wanted to lay on the bench and sleep the whole time.
Oh.
We had young kids and so,
yeah.
So it was pretty bad going through those couple of years. But once I got on the right medication that worked for me and started to work through things with a therapist, that I was able to look and think more critically and just not, kind of question things, because my whole life it was do what was said so that no one finds out this secret, right? I didn't want to disappoint my parents or, because somehow they'd figure out the secret. To now, okay, I can ask questions. I can think more critically about things. And it was like, this fog was lifted from my mind to where I thought more about it. And so it was actually in 2018 when I was watching the Believer documentary, really when it brought it back up. Meg and I were actually watching it together, there was a part where I actually ended up rewinding a couple times and asked her if he really said what it was. And I think it was, that being homosexual was a sin like drinking or something like that. It didn't make, all of a sudden that light bulb went off, like that doesn't make any sense. And then all of a sudden, all of the stuff that I had started studying back in 2013, 14, I started kind of remembering and started to ask questions and say, okay, that doesn't sound right. I need to learn more about this. But at the same time, I was too scared to tell Megan anything because, we just went through this whole mental health crisis. And now I'm going to throw right after we finally kind of get in a good area, throw a bunch of questions about the church into it. And so I spent a lot of time at work talking with coworkers about it and learning, and doing research myself, and didn't talk to her a lot about it at all, really. Which, if I could do it over again, I'd definitely do differently.
Very common tale.
Yes, and so I was so afraid to say anything that I was having questions or having issues with certain things, because I just put her through this very hard last few years with my mental health, that now I was going to turn around and do the same thing with a faith crisis. And looking back, they are very, very similar as far as trying to deal with it and the grieving portion and all of that.
Megan, I want to throw it to you because I feel like you've been through a lot, right? Just from what we've heard. And I'm not saying it goes both ways, right? You're there to support each other, but I can imagine just feeling heartbroken and sad and then wanting to fix things, right? As you did when you were trying to help him get heal and get help that he needed. And then at what point were you clued in to the fact that he may not feel the same way about the church? Tell us about that journey for you.
I think, was it the end of 2018 that you told me? And I don't know, like I felt like my whole world was blowing up again. For me, it totally came out of left field. I had no idea that he was feeling this way. And if, he wanted to talk about all of it. And I was like, I can't be the only one you talk to about this. You have to talk to somebody else. I did not handle it well at all in the beginning, but I told from the get-go, I said, we can make it work. I know we can, but it brought up a whole new ballpark of fears for me just because of how our marriage had been. And then we went through, because he was trying to hide this from me, I got pushed away a lot. And then we went through this whole mental health thing. And then he throws this bomb at me and says, he was afraid that I wasn't going to love him and I was going to leave him. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I've been with you through all this stuff the last 10 years. Like, why would you think that I'm going to leave you or whatever? And so, I think we ended up meeting with the bishop once to talk about it. And then he met with his parents a few times to talk about things, which I thought was going to be helpful in the beginning based off what I was being told. But then I found out that his mom had said some harsh things. And so I was like, well, God, that kind of backfired on me. But I always knew that we could make it work. It just was going to be hard. And then I mourned the loss of what our life was going to be. Our daughter turned 8 last year, so this was just before her 7th birthday, I think, that he told me And I remember her like in the car one day, just out of the blue, talking about how excited she was to get baptized. And like my heart just broke because her dad wasn't going to be able to baptize her. And she didn't, I just asked who she wanted to baptize her at the time. And she was like, I don't know, you. And I was like, well, I can't. And gave her like a whole list of people who could. Can't yet. Yeah. But, I had to leave her dad off of that. And that, just all those milestones in life that I thought were going to go one way that now aren't necessarily going to go the way we thought.
And you're allowed to grieve that. I mean, I think it's important to interject and just say that, it can be tempting for Alan, the transitioning spouse, to react negatively to the grief that your spouse is experiencing. There's either I feel terrible that she feels this way, and then on the other end there's no, this is happening to me. This isn't fair to me too. Like you need to get over this. I didn't choose this. And there's this like defiance that arises, at least in me. I'm not trying to say that how you reacted, Alex, but like it is so normal to grieve that. I mean, Katie has grieved those things and still grieves those, many of those things. Yeah. And it's difficult.
Megan, I look at your story and, I can see that in my own story that, you feel like one wave hits or maybe one tsunami hits and then another tsunami hits. And I think, where we're at, I think that there's a little bit of a negative thought that what's coming next? If this is happening to me, and it happens over and over again, what is it he's going to tell me next that he wants to do? And have you felt that?
I say to it, like, what's the next big bomb that's going to drop? Like I just keep waiting for something to drop. And I hate that that's how it is. But I just, I got those 2 bombs right in a row. And I'm like, okay, what's next? And I think I've reached out to you a few times in some fears that you shared that you had initially, like he wasn't going to want me. He was going to cheat on me. Like, he had always told me, like, I never tried alcohol because I knew if I did, I was going to be an alcoholic. And then he comes to me saying, I want to try alcohol. And like, oh my gosh, he's going to become an alcoholic. And, but I sometimes still, I'm like, okay, when's the next bomb coming? Like, what's next? And
yeah. And I think that is like something I felt too for a while. I kept wondering, oh no, when's the next foot going to drop? But also something that I learned along the way, which I think that's where you guys are, you're learning as well, is the tools that you need to communicate and to talk openly and not hide, right, Alex? Some of that fear and shame and thoughts of, oh no, if I say something, it's going to be worse, where keeping it inside is actually the most harm that's causing you pain as well as your spouse. And I think Alan and I are at a place now where we have learned the tools to be able to just talk about things without them being bombs, right? They're like, I was thinking about this, or I was thinking about that. It's not all at once. So I would love for you to share with us, what are some things that you learned in your mixed faith marriage with mental health wise? Megan, how do you support someone who is going through a mental health crisis? I'm sure that there are spouses out there that don't know what to do. So what would your advice be?
Gosh, I'm not going to lie. It's really hard. Like we said, I'm a nurse and I want to fix things. And I mean, we studied mental illness a little bit in school, and it's not my area that I work. So I know, like, people who are depressed, like, can have a hard time getting up and being active and doing things. But sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, can you just get up and help me? Like, I am drowning here. It for sure takes a lot of patience. We've also started therapy together, and that's been a huge help with our relationship.
What about in the mixed faith? I think that a lot of times there's crossover there, but kind of in mixed faith, what what have you found has been helpful as it's been in a little over 2 years since that bomb was dropped, but understanding that you're still working through it, you're still learning those tools, but what have you found helpful up to this point?
Well, with COVID happening and everything kind of getting shut down, it's kind of, I don't know. I haven't been very good about doing come follow me with my kids or even going to church. When he stopped going to church, there wasn't even a discussion like, hey, I'm going to stop coming. He just he had knee surgery and he just stopped coming. And then I was kind of on my own to get myself and my 3 children ready for church. He just did his own thing. So that was super hard. And a lot of times, at church, I'd be sitting in sacrament meeting wondering, why am I even here? I'm just fighting my kids the whole time. I'm not getting anything out of this. So then COVID happened and it was easy just to not go. And even since, they've started, our ward has broken up into groups and they just go for 45 minutes. But they also broadcast it online. And so I really haven't even gone to church since March. Our daughter did get baptized back in September, which Alex and I discussed that a lot. And I know, you guys have shared how much you guys have talked with Zara about it. So that was a big challenge that we had to overcome. But I feel like for us, the mental health has been at the forefront of things, and the mixed faith has kind of fallen to the back and we talk about it every once in a while, but it's more so a focus on the mental health.
Alex, how has it been for you now being out? Your wife knows where you're at, and you're working on your mental health. How has that been either helpful for you? What have you found that has been positives in this process?
Some of the positives for me, I'm definitely the poster boy for doing, doing everything the wrong way as far as, communicating with her about some of those milestones, whether it's, stopping wearing garments or going to church or talking about changing in beliefs. I did everything the wrong way. But through it all, some of the positives for me is it's helped me to it's let me be kind of more free, and I feel happier being able to kind of think for myself, feel accepted. Megan's definitely done a very good job of making me feel accepted for who I am, and really for the first time in my life, learning about who I am, what I believe, and why. It opened my eyes to how much patience Megan actually has and how strong she actually is, because that's things that I took for granted. But seeing how much that I put her through and still do, and how strong she is, has made me want to open up more and more to her. And it's still a slow process for me because I'm still, sometimes stuck in that fear, shame, guilt cycle. But it's for me, it's helped to actually strengthen our relationship. For her, just being able to accept me and take those fears away of, she's going to leave me, because I changed the contract, some of the typical worries that people have, and just how important communication is when it comes to whether it's mental health, faith and beliefs, but really having that communication, learning how to communicate effectively. That's something we're still learning through our therapist, how to communicate, effectively, because I'm still dealing with mental health, and some days are really good and some days are really bad. And my therapist always tells me that, at least so far, I'm very lucky, because a lot of people that have schizoaffective disorder, can't work, have problems with family, end up homeless, really have hard struggles. And so for me, it's an everyday struggle to make sure that I can provide for my family, give our relationship what it needs. And a lot of times I fall short on that. But it's just going through all of this, especially all kind of at the same time and back to back, has opened my eyes of, strong my wife is, and, how powerful a relationship can be the more communication that happens. And sometimes it's difficult conversations.
Yeah, we all have those difficult conversations. I mean, that's what you have to do to get through to the root of the issue or the problem, even though it's really hard to do. And, I love that you said, it's hard for you to open up. You're still learning how to do that because of the shame and guilt and fear that you're feeling. But I also want to point out, Megan, you said that, you haven't done Come Follow Me this year. And I don't know. I'm not trying to speak for you. What I pick up on that is that you feel guilt for what you haven't done with your kids when it comes to church stuff. And I can relate, because Alan and I had this conversation the other day, is I don't really push anything, when it comes to church. There's not a lot that I push on, just so that I can avoid having a conflict about it. And so you're holding that guilt as well. And so that's painful for both of you to hold that guilt and not be able to express that to each other. And I'm glad that you're doing so through therapy and communication. Megan, I want to give you a chance to speak to that maybe.
Yeah. I do feel guilt for not teaching my kids, what I should be per the church, and I think part of that, I love my mom to death, but she, have you done Come Follow Me with your kids? Have you done this? The new primary program came out. Did you talk goals with your kids? So I think some of the guilt comes from that, from having to be like, no, I haven't done that. I know I should, but I haven't. I don't want to push things with the church. I want my kids to be able to learn and choose for themselves what they want. And I think also because the mental health has been at the forefront, I would say I'm also maybe a little bit uncomfortable doing it. I would feel uncomfortable doing it with Alex around, and not because of anything that he's done or said to me about it. That's just my own thought on it. But the day is so busy, with school and other activities, there's just no other time to do it except when he would be here.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, I want to just say thank you for sharing all of this, both of you, because these are absolutely feelings that Alan and I have felt, not specific to mental health, and a little small depression and anxiety, but also to just Megan, also what you're feeling and you're thinking. And family members can be very well-meaning, but it can also come in the way of your relationship and marriage and how you want to raise your family. So mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing that. That's really tough to talk about, and yet so many in this area, in this group, is feeling that as well.
Megan, it's oftentimes it's hard to point out the wins when you're in the middle of the hurt.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Can I point out just in that last little part that you just talked about, you said a few things that were so key. You mentioned, I want the kids to be able to pick and choose for themselves. That is a lesson that is so difficult to embrace as a parent, especially in a mixed faith marriage, because something that you hold so dear, it's very, very real odds that one, two, or all of your children will choose not to continue in the church. So right. The fact that you've gotten there, that's a huge win. That's a really big win. You mentioned, I know it's very difficult because you're feeling this guilt surrounding not doing what you think you should, what you feel you should. And then the reasons that you give for not doing those things are very family centered. Mm-hmm. They're very considerate of your spouse's situation. That doesn't mean that there isn't any, that doesn't lessen the guilt maybe, but, or even there could even be small resentment, to that fact. But the reasons are good and genuine. And oh my gosh, it's so hard. I'll actually say it the other way. It's so easy to beat ourselves up for not being good enough and not doing what we should at all times. Like Katie and I were,
in every way.
We were away, just on a little date night, and I was telling her, like, in 2021, I want to be more intentional with the kids and get back to really teaching them. I feel like I've been kind of laser focused on work, and I haven't had enough effort for wanting to help teach the kids on different things. And it's like, it's this balance, the balance of trying to do what you feel is the best for you and your family, while also not kicking yourself when you don't hit that. It's really hard to find.
And Alex, I can imagine for you, like having those voices, especially when you're on the low, telling you you're not good enough, you're not doing enough. I can imagine that can be amplified in a marriage where you feel like you're constantly hurting your spouse or you're not living up to your parents' expectations.
Absolutely. My family and all of her family are all active. I'm kind of like the black sheep now. It's those voices definitely attack, and I feel a lot of guilt about, okay, I know I'm hurting her, or I know she has to go through things because of my choices, right? So yeah, we haven't had that same conversation with our families about me leaving the church as we did with my mental health. I think most of them kind of figured it out, but we've never been open about it. But, I feel guilt about some of the pressures that Megan gets, or the questions, or, hey, are you teaching your kids because Alex isn't going to do it? And that makes it extremely hard just for, the traditional person. But yeah, then you have those voices, and that's when they really go after me, and it becomes extremely difficult. And then it leads to, more depression, and then you feel more guilty because then you can't function, and then it puts more stress on Megan. And, that's one of the things that I'm working on, because I felt like I've put so much on her plate, and it just keeps getting, piled on there. And I see the stress that she goes through, and it hurts me to see her that way. So yeah, it makes the huge struggle. And so, yeah, when you mix those two, it makes it, twice as hard for sure.
Yeah.
I had a really interesting conversation with a group of friends who are in this space, and one of them has a husband that is going through mental health crisis, and it's hard. It is day to day hard, because there's, there can be some grumpiness, there can be some lashing out, there can be a lot of things in there. And, we had this discussion about this idea that we say that we want to love people where they're at, but that can be hard. It's one thing to say that, and it's another thing to do it. And, if we think about just having the mindset of maybe this is their best. Right now, what they are giving is their best. I think that makes it a little bit easier for us to love them where they're at if we have that in our mind. This is the best that we're doing. This is the best we can do together. This is the best today I can offer to you. And that's it. And let's just love each other for where we're at today. And I think that takes the pressure off of having any sort of expectation or guilt or shame or fear about where it will go. It's just, look, this is what today looks like. And we're going to just take it one day at a time. And Megan, you mentioned patience, and that is key. Time and patience with all of this as time goes on, and you just do the best you can, step by step. And that's what I hear from both of you, and that's what I can feel you doing as you talk about this with such emotion and love towards each other.
Well, I want to ask both of you, but Megan, I want to ask you first. So you are in the middle of it. You're actively working towards a thriving mixed faith marriage. You've already won some battles, but there are battles to be won. Mm-hmm. Fast forward to January 5th, 2023. It's 2 years from now. What does that look like? What does on that date, if we got back together, what are some of the battles that you're hoping to have won? What does your marriage look like in 2 years?
I mean, I feel like we have good periods and then we go through these ruts. And I hope that in that time we've learned the tools that we need to keep it more on the up and avoid so many of the downs that we have. I hope that we've learned all those communication tools and we can both be open and honest. And sometimes that takes waiting to talk about a topic until I'm not so emotionally charged on it, or vice versa, because that never ends well. I think we will still be together at that time. With his thing, one of my biggest fears is him taking his life. So I hope he's still around and that we're thriving and that we can just keep working at it day by day, because with mental health, that's what you have to do, is just take it day by day.
How about for you, Alex? What does 2 years from now look like?
Being able to continue to build on those, like she said, communication skills that we've learned, opening up, being more honest, and really when it comes to the mental health portion of it, being able to, come to that understanding, like Katie, you said, of here's the best I have today, and that's okay, and not, always beating ourselves up about not being good enough, and on the mixed faith marriage portion, I want to get to that point where we're able to, and our kids are starting to get old enough to share, what each of our thoughts are on different topics, and then letting them choose. So in 2 years, hopefully, that we have a good foundation of being able to talk to our children about what we believe, why we believe it, and being, open and honest with them, and being able to parent together, more effectively, and feel like we're, not failing in that aspect as well.
Notice, unless either of you were editing yourselves, neither of you said 2 years from now, I want Megan to have left the church, or 2 years from now, I want Alex to have come back to the church. Not to say that it's wrong to hope either of those things, because there are moments that both of us have kind of said, wouldn't it be easier if we were on the same page?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. However, it seems like you've both accepted, like, this is who I am. This is who my spouse is. We've chosen to move forward together. Like, that's, congratulations on being in that place, because not everyone is in that place. We get messages a lot And we talk to a lot of couples that are still trying to pull their spouse in or out of the church. And it doesn't work, first of all.
Yes.
And second is not the recipe for success in a mixed faith marriage.
And something else I want to commend both of you on is,
your faces. You have good faces, good, strong faces.
I think that the majority of our episodes, we catch people on the tail end of their journey, right? They've got all the wisdom. They've got so much to say about how they made it through. And you guys are a lot like us. We started recording, towards the middle-ish of our story. And so those feelings are so raw. And I really, really appreciate, and I think it's important for people to listen to this because we have so many new people entering the space. And a lot of times when they listen to our podcast, they think, wow, you guys are in a totally different place than where you started. And, I can't relate to anyone because now we're at the beginning. We're just starting this. And I feel like a lot of people that listen to this will find a lot of comfort and in relating to what you have to say because you are in the thick of it right now. So we really appreciate your willingness to come on because that's a hard find usually with interviews.
Yeah. I mean, in preparing for this, he was like, well, what advice do you have? I was like, I don't know because I don't feel like I really have any advice to give because I don't feel like I had a hard time. Like, I don't know what to say. I don't because I don't feel like, the other people where they have all this advice and wisdom. And, I listened to the one with the guy's a therapist. I can't remember their names. I'm drawing a blank on it right now. And I was like, oh my gosh, we have nothing compared to them. What are we going to offer? What value are we going to bring? Because we're not there.
It's hard to see those wins when you're in it. And part of that, coming on and us discussing it is kind of opens your eyes to, we've had a lot of hard times and gone through a lot, but starting to recognize here's some of the wins that we've had. Yeah. And now let's build on that and continue, growing that our relationship to where, we ultimately want it to be. You forget to see those wins and you focus on all of the things you're not doing instead of the things that you've done right. Yeah. So
it reminds me of, it's a loose fit, but I'm going for it. It reminds me of the Andy from The Office has he has a moment of sincerity in one of the later seasons where he says, I wish you could recognize the good old days while you're still in them. And it's a very profound quote where, look, I'm not saying you're in the good old days, but there is something to the early period of a mixed faith marriage, those first few years where, man, it feels like you're in the boxing ring, not against each other, but just against it, quote unquote, where you're just trying to figure this out. But guess what? Those are where, when the battles are won, that's when intimacy is earned. Intimacy isn't earned in not struggling. there is something that is a very gospel of Jesus Christ message. It really is. Yeah. It's like, that's how joy is through the trials and through the sadness and through the difficulties. You have to get, that's where the happiness is earned, is by pushing through the sad together.
And you're both athletes, so there's the athlete metaphor. Yeah.
I think at this point, with both of us past knee surgeries, we can safely say we're former athletes.
Former athletes, that's right.
I just had my fifth, so.
Oh man, I'm 3 behind you then, unless you account my first one was 2 knees, so I'm 2 behind you.
It's not something that you should be bragging about.
I know, right?
I don't know. That few weeks of Percocet makes it almost worth it.
Alex and Megan, we just thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing your story and opening up to us. I know that it will have an impact on someone because every story does.
Thanks for having us.
Appreciate it. And hopefully it helps someone out there. And, if it does and people have questions, feel free to reach out, on Facebook, and I'd love to talk to whoever.
Same.
Thank you both, and thanks everybody for listening to Marriage on Tightrope.